Welcome to, or welcome back to, At the Edge of Chaos. Today we're going to go over the first previews for my Jurassic Park card game. This is unscripted, off the cuff, so hopefully I won't mess anything up or forget any important details, but I'm just going to show us some cards off and describe the thought behind the design and how some of the game rules work. Eventually we'll have a full rules video in the future, but first we're going to do some individual previews of different types of cards. First, to lay the groundwork, I wanted to demonstrate what a board state looks like in the game. Otherwise, you don't have too much reference material to go off of to evaluate the cards, really. So this is what the game will look like when it's being played. The idea is that you and the other players are each controlling your rival versions of Jurassic Park, trying to build the best park and win the game, while sabotaging rival parks. Now, the key thing about when you build a park in this game is that the placement of cards describes the layout of the park. So you start with your first dinosaur in the middle of your board, and then and that forms a paddock, right? So a dinosaur forms a paddock, and then you build your next paddock next to it in either direction by playing another dinosaur, or you can play an attraction, which is what these are, a paddock upgrade. Sorry, attraction's not a V term. A paddock upgrade, because they're not always attractions. And the paddock upgrade can also define a new paddock. And every paddock can have one species card and one paddock upgrade. And that collectively, those two cards together is a paddock, whether or not the other card is present at the moment. In addition to paddock upgrades and your species cards, which are these, the dinosaurs, you can have employees. We got Alan Grant and Claire Deering down here, and you can have facilities. So facilities are support structures in your park that are specifically not part of a paddock. So this here is the control room. And in addition to those cards, you can end up with these cards in your park, which are obstacles. In this case, they are played by the other player and their negative effects. This one here is no endorsement, making it harder for this park to win the game by a small amount. We'll see the exact effect in the future. So yeah, you basically build your park out over time, adding new dinosaur species, adding new paddock upgrades, making the individual exhibited dinosaurs better, hiring employees, and building up your facilities. Employees, facilities, and paddock upgrades collectively are assets, so there's cards that interact with this subsection of, like, call it support for the park, right? A park is dinosaurs and the things that support the dinosaurs, which are collectively assets. There's another card type that doesn't go to the board, which is actions. We won't get into them here. So that kind of gives you the idea of what's happening here. You're slowly expanding the park with new species and paddock upgrades. So what I'm going to go through today is going to be the core 6 dinosaurs from the original Jurassic Park. I left out the Parasaur. Leave an angry comment if you feel like I should have included Parasaur. So the first one we'll go through here is Dilophosaurus. We'll go through the carnivores, except for the Rex. We'll save the Rex for last, and then we'll go for the herbivores. The herbivores highlight a few other different mechanics, so it's kind of easier to start with the carnivores. It made sense. So when we look at a dinosaur card, we've got the species name up here, Dilophosaurus, obviously. We've got the rarity. The rarity is the revenue cost you need to play to clone that species into your park, to introduce the first member of that species, to get that viable DNA going, basically. We've got the traits down here. Dilophosaurus is a carnivore and a theropod. The first trait is always the diet, and the other traits are clade traits. The diet and clades, those just interact with other card effects. They don't have any inherent game effect. And we can see down here that Dilophosaurus has a when clone trigger. So when you first clone this species, when you play the actual species card to the park, you get this clone trigger, which trashes a random card from a rival's hand. So you pick a rival player, and they discard a card at random. The discard pile is called the trash. It's thematic. And then we have the stats. So the Dilophosaurus has an income value of 2. That means it makes 2 revenue per turn if it's successfully exhibited in the park. It's got a fame value of 3. Fame is how you win the game. The goal is to get the most famous park out of all the players first. And for that to happen, the fame value has to apply when the dinosaur's exhibited, right? So if something happens where the dinosaur doesn't show up or escapes, the fame value won't apply towards victory. Then we have 2 stats on here, ferocity and security. These are related primarily to dinosaur breakouts. So if ever a dinosaur is going to possibly break out, you make a security check to see if it escapes or if it fails in its escape attempt. And if it does escape, ferocity is the amount of damage it causes around the park in terms of financial losses. So Dilophosaurus here makes 2 income a turn, but if it breaks out, I will instead lose 3 revenue instead of gain 2 revenue, because it won't be exhibited if it escapes. So yeah, that's kind of the basic overview of what dinosaurs are like. They get more involved. More evolved? I think I was going to say evolved. They get more involved, though. Velociraptor here, more expensive, worth more fame, provides more income, but it's got a higher security rating. And it's got a little bit more going on here in the text box. So Velociraptor has an additional clade. I've gone with the more Jurassic Park inclined thematic term raptor as opposed to the actual proper clade. Velociraptor, raptors in general, are the only exception to that. All the other clades in the game are at least a minor variation on the actual proper scientific clade. Now Velociraptor here gets ferocity +1 for each additional population on Velociraptor. And what that means is after you've established a species in your park, by cloning the first member of the species, which is playing the card, you can pay 4 revenue on future turns to clone an additional population for that species. Now, adding population to a species doesn't push you any closer to winning the game, but it makes you more money, right? Your park is not going to become more famous for having 2 Velociraptors versus 1. People are going to be excited about having Velociraptor in general. But if you have 2 Velociraptors instead of 1, you'll pull in more money consistently. It also allows you to protect that species from extinction. That is not a game term. I'm just saying that flavorfully. Extinct has an actual specific game term. We'll see that in the future at some point. But while you have only a single Velociraptor in your park, it's really easy for that species to be wiped out by sabotage, by obstacles played by the other player. Whereas if you breed some more population, you get kind of a reserve population there. And if a dinosaur dies, it's not going to wipe out the whole species. And then the second effect here on the Velociraptor is Chaos Effect. So what Chaos Effect is every turn you flip over the top card of your deck, and you check the number up in the corner. Now, the exception to this is species cards. As we've seen, they have rarity up in the corner, which is their cost. Every dinosaur card, excuse me, every species card is considered to have a Chaos Effect value of 0. 0 chaos. It's not written on the card. I might change that during testing if people rebel against that notion. It was mostly just a space-saving issue or space-saving technique on the card to put rarity where the chaos would normally go on your other card types. This is the only one that doesn't have the number on it, though. So it's generally pretty easy to remember that the species cards are 0 chaos. So when you flip that 1 chaos effect number, it'll be from 0 to 4, and it will trigger every matching chaos effect in your park. So you pull that 1 card for the whole park. If it's a 4, it triggers every card in your park that has a chaos effect 4, including this Velociraptor, which will add 1 population to Velociraptor. The significance here of this card effect, of course, is that the raptors were the species that was breeding in the original Jurassic Park. They're breeding without desire to breed them, right? They were breeding on their own. So that's what happens here. The raptors will sporadically breed, and as the pack grows in size, they'll get more fierce, and if they do escape from their enclosure, you will have much more damage around the park from those unplanned raptors. I should explain the thought behind Dilophosaurus. It's pretty simple. Basically, when I was designing the cards for the game, I treated poison or venom as random discards from hand, right? It's like it's spitting and blinding you, so you lose a card. Next up, Triceratops, another 4-fame dinosaur. Triceratops also has a chaos effect. This is a random chance of Triceratops to be worth more fame in a turn. This effect is maybe not the most thematic effect in the game, but chaos effect is really a theme for the Ceratopsians. They're kind of unpredictable. Sometimes Triceratops will be chilling on the ground with a tummy ache, and other times it'll be running around all angry, right? Triceratops, of course, 3 horns, so I went with a chaos effect of 3 for this one. I felt like that made some sense. And yeah, so you have a random 1 in 5 chance basically of Triceratops becoming worth +2 fame, going up to an incredible 6 fame base. Which means that Triceratops is a dinosaur that can push you up to the edge of victory and then randomly push you further past it, winning you the game kind of as a surprise for the other players. So they'll have to evaluate that when they decide if they're going to take risks or not on trying to like stop you from winning next turn when you have that Triceratops in play. Disappointingly, perhaps, I had to go with a Jurassic World Triceratops instead of Jurassic Park. The card game is called, at least the beta version of the card game is called the Jurassic Park Card Game, but it is based on all of the films and some extended extra media as well. Probably not much Camp Cretaceous, if any. I've still got a few cards to source images for or like name and decide the theme for. So we might get a little bit of Camp Cretaceous in the first set, but I do plan to do Camp Cretaceous in the future. Right now, basically, it's the first 5 movies and Battle at Big Rock that form the core set, let's say. So yeah, the sick Triceratops from Jurassic Park was reserved for obstacle effects, basically. That was a really great source for like things that can go wrong in a park, which meant then I had to find a different picture for Triceratops to use for the actual species card, and I went with the insanely inferior Jurassic World version of Triceratops. Next up, Galamimus. Now, first thing you might notice, the title is a different color, and that has a gameplay significance. Also, Galamimus is a theropod because it is, but it is an herbivore, which puts it into a unique position of being the only herbivorous theropod in the game, at least right now. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't miss anything else on those other ones. Now we can see here that Galamimus has an effect where it costs less revenue to clone additional population. That's because Jurassic Park had a huge herd of Galamimus. So Galamimus exists to support a strategy of breeding a large population of this particular dinosaur, right? So that's kind of like an income-focused strategy as opposed to a fame-focused strategy. And yeah, the blue title here on Galamimus means that it's a starter dinosaur. So you begin your park. The only card you have in play at the very start of the game is your starting species, which can be Galamimus or it can be a variety of other starters. We're going to see another one in a second. And the starting species are always pretty cheap. You do pay for the starting species out of your initial pool of 10 revenue you start the game with. So Galamimus is one of the cheapest, costing only 3 revenue out of your starting 10. And then the starting species generally all have a low income value and a fame of 1. They're worth very little fame for your park overall. But they're also not likely to backfire early on and damage your park. Galamimus is actually kind of in the middle of the pack here as far as containment goes. They like to stampede and run around, so they're a little bit harder to contain than some other starter species. Yeah, so that's the deal with Galamimus. Blue title equals starting species. Much like the Brachiosaurus, another starting species. Brachiosaurus here costs a little bit more to start with for rarity. You're cloning a very massive sauropod instead of a smaller Nithomimosaur, so you got to pay a little bit extra. Brachiosaurus is a gentle giant with only a ferocity of 1. However, it being so large, it's not very easily contained, and it gets a security rating of 3. Ultimately, what this serves to do is not so much have the Brachiosaur escapes be damaging to the park, as much as it is that the Brachiosaur escapes prevent you from making the money from Brachiosaurus's game text. Brachiosaurus here gets you a bonus +2 income while you have no other species in your park. The reasoning behind that is it's the first dinosaur seen by the guests in the original movie. So they're incredibly wowed by it. It's the same concept, right? If Brachiosaurus is the only dinosaur in your park, your guests are incredibly wowed by it, you make a bunch of extra money. And then once your park starts to diversify and have more species, the Brachiosaurus kind of trails off a little bit in impressiveness. In terms of strategy for the game, Brachiosaurus gives you kind of a really nice early momentum boost, giving you a lot of extra money to play with in the early turns while you set your park up before you finally introduce a second species into the park. In playtesting, this usually means Brachiosaurus players would focus on upgrading the Brachiosaurus. They would clone, 2, 3, 4 Brachiosaurs, get a good base population going, pulling in that extra money, and then they would transition over to expanding the park laterally then after they had made a decent reservoir of cash protecting the Brachiosaurus, building up that population. Whereas with the Galamimus, This plays more like you put a few initial turns into building up the population of Galamimus, and then any turn kind of where you don't otherwise clone a different species or population on a different dinosaur, you just keep adding to Galamimus over the whole course of the game. Whereas Brachiosaurus, at some point, you just kind of switch off of cloning new Brachiosaurs. You don't need any more past like 4, 5, 3, something like that. And then we get to the Queen of Nublar herself, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. We have a different color for the title. And what this is like a rare. I actually don't have I don't have like a thematic term for this. I need to do some brainstorming and come up with a good term for what the color should represent. Legendary, maybe. But this represents the biggest and baddest dinosaurs. The iconic dinosaurs of the films, like Tyrannosaurus Rex, kind of the big bads. You'll see like Indominus Rex will be a gold, Indoraptor will be a gold, so on and so forth. And what this means is you only get one gold title species in your park. The gold titles actually extend to other card types too. Basically, for every set of cards you're putting in your deck, you get 1 gold. So if you put 10 species into your deck, you get 1 golden species. Could be Tyrannosaurus Rex, and the other 9 are the typical white titles like Triceratops here. And then the blue don't count towards the deck and they start in play. So the gold titled species have a very high rarity cost in general. Tyrannosaurus is actually on the cheaper side of the distribution of cost for the gold titled ones. We see the Tyrannosaurus here produces an income of 3 and is worth an incredible 5 fame base, but it does have a very high security and ferocity rating, which means that you really need to take good care on protecting these species and keep them from breaking out. They're very easy targets for rival parks who want to slow you down, right? If the rival park plays some sort of obstacle to encourage the Tyrannosaurus to break out, it's very likely to break out, which will become damaging to your park. You'll lose out on the money from exhibiting the Tyrannosaurus, and you'll take this very large value of 4 ferocity here in terms of damages. Tyrannosaurus Rex is again a theropod, but it is also a coelurosaur. And Tyrannosaurus Rex has this unique effect here where it affects all other carnivores in your park, reducing their ferocity rating by 2 during breakouts. To a minimum of 1, of course, but only for the carnivores that can't stand toe-to-toe with the Tyrannosaurus. She is the dominant predator of the Nublar ecosystem. She keeps all the other small predators in check, making them less damaging, to a point. In particular, if we look back at Velociraptor, 3 ferocity, right? So Velociraptor gets reduced ferocity from the Tyrannosaurus, unless she has a pack. Once you've cloned additional population for Velociraptor, the ferocity +1 kicks in. 2 raptors, ferocity of 4, no longer reduced by the Tyrannosaurus, right? 2 raptors can fight a Tyrannosaur, theoretically. They won't win, obviously. We've all seen the movie. But the point is, the Rex can't keep them in check anymore and reduce their ferocity. So that's the idea here, right? The Rex is the dominant predator of that ecosystem, the apex. So yeah, and I'll also mention this Tyrannosaurus Rex effect. This is new for this beta test. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I think this might be the only new card effect for species in the entire new beta. I was unhappy with the previous iteration of Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's been the hardest card to nail down an iconic effect for it, right? Like, how do you encapsulate the vibe, the effect of a Tyrannosaurus in 4 lines of text, right? The other dinosaurs, they worked out pretty well, but just Tyrannosaurus Rex has been one that's been a stumper. Another one that's been a little bit gone through a few iterations, not in terms of this new version. I'm pretty okay with the current version, is Stegosaurus. It's really hard to get a theme, a vibe for Stegosaurus, but I think I got one that I like, which we'll see sometime in the future. So yeah, that's everything for these previews. The 6 core Jurassic Park 1 species. Yeah, and so we'll do another preview video at some point in the future. I'm not going to set a schedule for these yet. Once the channel has a little bit more traction, a little bit more interaction with community, then we'll look at doing some more stuff. Maybe some requested previews for the kind of things people want to see, stuff like that. And I'll have to start working on at some point a proper rules video and like a proper gameplay demo video before the proper beta test. That way that everybody can see that and the beta testers have an idea of what's going to go on with the game. Assuming we get any beta testers at all. I mean, right now, obviously, the channel is new. This video is being recorded before I've even advertised the channel around much at all. I've shown it to some friends and mentioned it on my Discord, and that's about it. But yeah, and after this video, the next content wave we're going to get is going to be Jurassic World Evolution 2 for a while. So we're probably not going to have another preview video for like a few weeks or so. While we focus on Jurassic World Evolution 2 before we come back to Jurassic Park Card Game stuff. And then I imagine after the second preview video for Jurassic Park Card Game, we'll probably have Camp Cretaceous coming out, and we'll pivot over to that for another week or something like that. But yeah, just a tentative schedule, at least give you an idea. And yeah, if you're excited about this project, if you're really excited to see where this goes, I would very much appreciate, subscriptions on the channel, comments, all that usual crap, right? It drives engagement, gets people to notice the channel. It's a thing that needs to happen for a rudimentary channel to grow. I despise saying that. I hate fucking like and subscribe. But it has to happen for a channel to grow. I'm not concerned about getting 1,000 million subscribers, right? Like, I just need a tiny amount of people on here who are interested to interact with and get feedback from, right? So if the channel gets 100 subscribers total, I'll be perfectly content with that. So yeah, please, if this is something you want to see more of, you want to see this happen, spread this around, find like-minded people, try to get them over here so that we can make this game, the final version of this game, the release digital print-to-play version of this game, the best game it can be at that point in time. And if you've watched this far in the video, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, hopefully.